We begin with breaking news from the United States, where Donald Trump has announced a raft of tariffs on goods imported into the U.S. from around the world.
The largest economies in Asia will also be hit with some of the more larger tariffs under President Trump's plan. The president announced that the U.S. would charge a 34% tax on imports from China on top of the existing 20% tariffs on goods. Some goods from India would be hit with a 26% tariff. Japanese imports would be hit with a 24% tariff. There will also be a 25% tariff on South Korea and 32% on Taiwan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode where we unpack the kind of economic cluster asterisk CT that would make even the most seasoned economist pour themselves a stiff drink. Today, we're diving headfirst into the belly of the beast Trump's trade wars and examining the global fallout from his tariff frenzy. Buckle up, because we're about to explore how 11 countries got caught in the crossfire, and spoiler alert, it's not pretty. This isn't some dry economics lecture. We're talking about farmers losing their livelihoods, manufacturers shutting down shop, and a whole lot of global instability. Over the next few minutes, we'll unpack the human cost of these tariffs, country by country, sector by sector, so grab your thinking caps and maybe a stress ball or two, because things are about to get real. Alright, let's start with the big kahuna, the trade war that launched 1,000 ships, or at least stalled a few thousand shipping containers, the US-China trade war. This was a full-blown economic showdown, with tariffs flying faster than insults at a presidential debate. Trump decided to slap tariffs on over $360 billion worth of Chinese goods. We're talking everything from electronics and machinery to furniture and textiles.
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. We will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that.
China retaliated with their own tariffs on key American exports like soybeans, cars, and even seafood. Remember those heartwarming images of lobstermen in Maine struggling to stay afloat? Yeah, that was partly thanks to this trade war. The result? Global market instability, disrupted supply chains, and a whole lot of economic uncertainty. American consumers ended up paying more for goods, Chinese manufacturers faced decreased demand, and the global economy took a hit. Now, let's shift our attention to Iran, a country no stranger to economic pressure from the US. The sanctions imposed by the Trump administration had a devastating impact on the Iranian economy. These sanctions effectively choked off Iran's oil exports, which, for a country heavily reliant on oil revenue, was like cutting off a vital artery. We're talking about a plummet in oil exports by over 80%, folks. The sanctions also targeted other key sectors like petrochemicals and metal exports, further crippling the Iranian economy. Imagine trying to run a business when you're essentially barred from doing business with most of the world. The impact on ordinary Iranians was particularly harsh. The Iranian rial plummeted in value, making everyday goods significantly more expensive. Next up, we travel to Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, which found itself caught in the crosshairs of Trump's trade wars, despite not being the intended target. The tariffs on steel and aluminum, while primarily aimed at China, had a ripple effect across the globe, impacting countries like Nigeria that relied on exporting these materials to the US. We're talking about tariffs of 10 to 25%, which might not sound like much, but in the cutthroat world of global trade, it can be the difference between making a profit and going bust. These tariffs indirectly impacted Nigeria's oil and manufacturing exports, two key sectors of their economy. The decline in Nigerian exports to the US, coupled with the overall uncertainty in the global market caused by these trade wars, put a significant strain on the Nigerian economy. It highlighted the interconnectedness of the global trade system and how even seemingly targeted measures can have far-reaching consequences. Chapter 4. Canada, America, first hits a little too close to home. Oh, Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north, also got a taste of the America First policy, and let's just say they weren't exactly thrilled about it. Trump decided to slap tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, claiming, without a hint of irony, that it was a matter of national security. Canada, understandably miffed, retaliated with tariffs of their own on a range of U.S. products, from ketchup and bourbon to toilet paper and playing cards. It was a targeted strike aimed at maximizing political pain, and it worked. The trade war, brief as it was, disrupted North American manufacturing and agricultural exports, costing both countries billions of dollars. It was a lose-lose situation, really. Chapter 5 Mexico NAFTA gets a Trump makeover. Next up, we head south of the border to Mexico, another victim of Trump's tariff-happy trigger finger. The same steel and aluminum tariffs that plagued Canada also hit Mexico, impacting their auto parts, steel, and agricultural industries. Mexico, not one to back down from a trade spat, retaliated with tariffs on a range of U.S. products, including agricultural goods like pork, apples, and cheese. The result? The USMCA, the trade deal that replaced NAFTA, which, let's be honest, was basically NAFTA, with a fresh coat of paint and a few tweaks here and there. It was a whole lot of drama for what amounted to a relatively minor policy shift. Chapter 6. The European Union, from allies to adversaries. Across the pond, the European Union, a bloc that usually enjoys a relatively chummy relationship with the US, also found itself on the receiving end of Trump's trade wrath. The steel and aluminum tariffs hit the EU, impacting their metals, autos, wine, and cheese industries. The EU retaliated with tariffs on a range of iconic American products, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles, bourbon whiskey, and Levi's jeans. The trade tensions between the US and the EU, two of the world's largest economies, sent shockwaves through the global trading system. It highlighted the fragility of the rules-based order that had governed global trade for decades and raised concerns about a potential slide towards protectionism. Next, we travel to India, the world's largest democracy, which also found itself tangled in Trump's trade web. The steel and aluminum tariffs naturally made an appearance, impacting India's metals, agricultural exports, and pharmaceutical industries. Trump also revoked India's generalized system of preferences status, which allowed certain Indian goods to enter the US duty-free. India, in retaliation, imposed tariffs on a range of US products, including almonds, apples, and walnuts. The trade spat between the US and India highlighted the growing tensions over trade imbalances and protectionist policies. Now let's turn our attention to Russia, a country no stranger to US sanctions. The steel and aluminum tariffs hit Russia, impacting their metals, energy, and agricultural industries. Russia, already subject to a complex web of US sanctions, responded to the tariffs with their own set of retaliatory measures. They imposed tariffs on a range of US products, further escalating trade tensions between the two countries. The trade war between the US and Russia highlighted the growing trend of using trade as a weapon in international relations. Next, we head to Turkey, a NATO ally that found itself on the receiving end of Trump's unpredictable trade policies. In 2018, Trump doubled the tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum, a move that sent shockwaves through the Turkish economy, which was already grappling with a currency crisis. The tariffs exacerbated the country's economic woes, sending the Turkish lira into a tailspin. Turkey, in retaliation, imposed tariffs on a range of US products, including cars, alcohol, and tobacco. The trade spat between the US and Turkey highlighted the growing strains within the alliance and raised concerns about the potential for further economic and political instability in the region. Next up, we travel to Japan, a long-standing US ally that also got caught in the crossfire of Trump's trade wars. The steel and aluminum tariffs hit Japan, impacting their auto parts and metals industries. Trump, it seemed, was an equal opportunity tariff imposer, willing to target even America's closest allies in his pursuit of what he deemed fair trade. Japan eventually responded with tariffs of their own on a range of US products, including agricultural goods and motorcycles. The trade tensions between the US and Japan highlighted the growing uncertainty in the global trading system. Finally, we arrive in Saudi Arabia, a key US ally in the Middle East and a major oil producer. Trump decided to slap tariffs on Saudi steel and derivative products. These tariffs weren't as extensive as those imposed on other countries, but they still had an impact, particularly on Saudi Arabia's construction and steel export sectors. The tariffs, coupled with the broader uncertainty in the global oil market, made it more expensive for Saudi Arabia to pursue its ambitious infrastructure projects. Saudi Arabia, while publicly downplaying the impact of the tariffs, likely to avoid further straining relations with the US, quietly worked to mitigate the damage. The trade spat highlighted the challenges of balancing economic interests with geopolitical alliances. So, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of the global fallout from Trump's trade wars. These tariffs, often imposed with little regard for their broader economic consequences, caused chaos and uncertainty in the global trading system. From China to Canada, Mexico to the EU, countries around the world felt the impact of these tariffs, either directly or indirectly. Businesses faced higher costs, consumers paid more for goods, and the global economy took a hit. The trade wars were a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, what happens in one country can have ripple effects across the globe.